A warm spring breeze brushed across the mountain pass, ruffling the newly sprouted grasses and stirring the delicate petals of half-bloomed flowers. Just beyond that narrow road stood a weathered torii gate, its paint chipped and grey, the wooden beams streaked with age. One side of it had collapsed in a storm the previous winter, leaving the space it once marked in a state of uncertain welcome. Beyond the broken gate lay a clearing where a single cherry tree swayed in the wind. It was an ancient tree, bigger than most others in the region, with twisted roots emerging from the earth like a maze of knotted serpents. Its bark was discoloured and cracked, as though marred by centuries of conflict. Even so, mysterious blossoms clung to a few of its branches, pale pink petals that held an unearthly glow. Where the torii gate opened into the clearing, villagers customarily placed wooden talismans to appease the spiritual forces rumoured to dwell there. Many believed that something unnatural resided in the clearing, the restless soul of a warrior who had died defending this patch of land. The villagers quietly circulated stories about a curse that lingered around this solitary sakura, and the name they hissed in hushed tones was Yoshinobu Matsuda-a, samurai said to be bound to the tree since the day he took his final breath. Over the years, travellers who wandered too close at dusk told tales of encountering wandering lights or hearing the forlorn hum of a flute echoing in the gloom. It was on a mild spring afternoon that a young Miko named Amaya arrived in the small village, descending the mountain path to investigate the root of such rumours. The head priest of her shrine, worried by the accounts of curses and restless ghosts, had sent her to perform rites of purification. The villagers greeted her with both hope and worry etched across their faces. They pleaded for her to dispel the darkness that had settled over the cursed cherry tree. Some whispered that their ancestors wanted to preserve the story as part of the village's lore. Others simply yearned for the threat of misfortune to be lifted from their daily lives. The local innkeeper guided Amaya to a humble dwelling, explaining that it once housed travelling samurai long before the roads fell into disuse. She set her few possessions in a corner: a bag of talismans, a small prayer bell, and a wooden flute passed down through her family. The flute, slender and unadorned, was an heirloom from her great-grandfather, who had been a wandering priest. He had claimed it could channel spiritual energies and help calm agitated spirits. Amaya had never needed to test the flute's power. She was uncertain how to approach the rumoured haunting, though she resolved to do her duty, cleanse the place of evil, if any existed. That night, while the moon shone full and bright, she prepared for the ritual by carefully threading protective prayers into tiny paper strips. She read over the few manuscripts she had brought, which described various rites for exorcising malevolent entities. A faded scroll from the shrine library bore sketches reminiscent of the torii gate and the tree in question. The text told of a legendary sakura that refused to shed its blossoms, harbouring the vengeful spirit of a warrior who died in disgrace. According to the scroll, the warrior's fury had imbued the tree with a living curse. Intrigued and a bit uneasy, Amaya nestled into a corner of her small room and drifted into a restless sleep, lulled by the quiet hush of the mountain winds. At dawn, a light drizzle blanketed the village. Under a broad paper umbrella, Amaya made her way toward the cracked torii gate. The path twitched with pockets of mist that melded with each footstep, obscuring the way. Before passing under the gate, she paused to utter a prayer and sprinkle a handful of purifying salt. Something about the clearing felt unusually still, as though every animal, every insect, even the wind was holding its breath. Her gaze fell on the great tree, and immediately she felt drawn to it. The blossoms, tinged with a faint luminescence despite the absence of direct sunlight, moved almost in sync with her heartbeat, stirring in a breeze she could not sense. She placed her hand gently on the bark. The texture was jagged, cold to the touch, and as she pressed her palm, a flash of an image streaked through her mind. A battlefield drenched by a blood-red sunset, soldiers locked in mortal combat, and a lone samurai falling to his knees at the foot of a once-living tree. She gasped and jerked her hand away. The vision retreated, like a dream upon waking. Her breath caught in her chest, and she stood there, uncertain whether she had imagined it or the spirit had truly reached out to her. Bracing herself, she looped her beaded rosary around her wrist, stepped back from the tree and positioned prayer wards in a wide circle around its base. She recited an incantation meant to beckon forth the spirit within. The leaves stirred softly, and a faint silver glow manifested beside the thick trunk. Amaya's voice trembled in her throat as the shape of a figure emerged. The form was that of a samurai in battered armor, the plates chipped and tarnished, the chest emblazoned with a mon, a family crest she did not recognize. His face pale and drawn seam locked in an expression of profound sorrow and determination. A blade, too ethereal to be steel, hung at his waist. Amaya knew she had awakened Yoshinobu Matsuda's spirit. In the quiet, she caught the muffled sounds like distant war cries, an echo from another time. Eyes as deep as an abandoned well flicked open, meeting her gaze. When he spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper, as though each syllable had to traverse centuries. "Why do you disturb my watch?" Stammering, she found what words she could. "I am here to grant you rest, to help lift this curse. If indeed a curse binds you here." She expected resistance or anger, but he only looked upwards at the discolored blossoms. "I have forgotten what rest means," he murmured. "Yet I cannot abandon my duty." His voice flickered with a quiet pain, and in that moment, the drizzle whispered through the clearing. Amaya laced her fingers together in prayer, seeking guidance. Spirits often clung to the living world out of regret or unfinished business. Whispering a calming chant, she asked Yoshinobu to recount what had transpired that bound him to the tree. He lowered his gaze to the wards she had placed. Although the wards glowed softly, they did not hinder him from speaking. "In life, I served my lord with devotion. When our castle was besieged, we made our stand at these very slopes. He commanded me to hold this ground, this non-existent stronghold, while he retreated with the rest of his army. As the enemy closed in, I realized his order was a ruse. My mission was to stall the attackers, a futile sacrifice. I fought with all my might. Even when I could barely stand, I held on, determined not to fail him. In the end, the enemy overran me. My lord never returned. I died cursing my own blind loyalty. As I bled at the foot of this young Sakura, I swore an oath to defend it with my final breath, for no other reason than to hold true to something. And so my spirit remains. Every spring the blossoms bloom from the sorrow that seeps into the roots." A pang of sympathy lodged itself in Amaya's heart, but she sensed a deeper bitterness in him. "Your loyalty is admirable, but the war ended long ago. There is no one left to fight, no reason to remain on guard." His eyes, dark and hollow, pierced her. "It is not so simple. The moment I vowed to stand my ground, the tree became a vessel for my spirit. I have no illusions that my lord will ever return. Yet my promise to defend these blossoms stands. My resentment, my regrets, all of it is woven into the wood. This place remains steeped in sorrow because I cannot move on." Over the following days, Amaya returned repeatedly to the clearing, undeterred by the gloom that surrounded it. She tried different prayers and purification rituals, reciting sutras by candlelight. She fasted and chanted throughout the night. Though the wards shimmered, they did little to break the bond. Occasionally, Yoshinobu manifested to watch her efforts. At times, he would circle the perimeter, scanning the horizon as if expecting an approaching army. Other times, he seemed lost in his own haunting memories, a soldier perpetually reliving his final stand. One late afternoon, feeling the weight of failure, Amaya rested on a mossy stone at the clearing's edge. She pulled out her ancestral flute, rotating it in her hands, uncertain if it would help. Yoshinobu emerged from behind the tree as though drawn by a subtle summons, or perhaps by her evident fatigue. She looked at him through the orange haze of evening sunlight. "I've tried every rite I know," she said softly, "but your spirit still clings to this place. My heart aches to see you bound in such grief. Is there nothing you desire beyond fulfilling a vow made in despair?" He stared at the flute, a faint light shimmering in his gaze. "You play that instrument?" She hesitated, recalling that she'd never performed in front of an audience. But something about his tone hinted at a quiet longing. "I haven't played in years, but yes, I know a few melodies my mother taught me." Yoshinobu nodded once, as though he had found a momentary beacon in the gloom. So, Amaya lifted the flute to her lips. At first, the notes came out tentative, uncertain. Gradually, the melody softened, becoming as gentle as the breeze in a bamboo grove. She played a lullaby from her childhood, a tune meant to honor benevolent spirits and ancestors. The clearing's silence absorbed the music like parched earth absorbing a single drop of rain. Slowly, the air around the tree took on a lighter quality. When Amaya finished, a hush settled over them. Yoshinobu almost appeared alive in that instant, the hollowness in his eyes momentarily replaced by something else. Perhaps nostalgia, perhaps regret. "That melody. It reminds me of how spring used to feel, before the battlefield consumed everything." Then he drifted away, vanishing into the twilight without further explanation. Amaya's next days were occupied by consultations with the villagers, who, having heard of her progress, brought her spiced rice and pickled vegetables for sustenance. She studied an ancient volume that described a final ritual for releasing bound spirits, a ceremony known as the Gathering of Petals, which demanded a unique synergy of prayer, music, and an offering of personal significance. This ritual sought to transform the spirit's anguish into acceptance, dissolving the tether that anchored it. Emboldened by the knowledge, she proposed the plan to Yoshinobu the next time he appeared. She told him that she would play her flute at midnight beneath the tree's branches. "The pathway to the afterlife may open for you," she explained, her voice measured but compassionate. "We can gather the blossoms that fall during the ceremony and offer them as a symbol of release. Are you willing to let go of your vow if the ritual succeeds?" He answered her question with another. "Do you believe these withered blossoms can bring atonement for my failure?" "I believe that in the offering you'll find peace," she replied with as much conviction as she could muster. He made no verbal promise, but his somber gaze flickered, suggesting the slightest shift in his stance. On the night of the ceremony, the villagers gathered timidly at the Torii gate, some too frightened to enter the clearing. They silently watched Amaya arrange small lanterns in a circle around the cursed cherry tree. The sky was cloudless, the moon bright as a pearl. Wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying a subtle tension in its breath. The wards around the tree shimmered faintly, receiving renewed energy from the hushed chanting that wafted from Amaya's lip. Midnight arrived. Amaya signaled for all watchers to maintain silence before she brought the flute to her lips. Her first notes were trembling with anticipation. Gradually, they coalesced into a melody that was at once mournful and soothing. She allowed the music to encapsulate the warrior's sorrow, a reflection of regret, betrayal, solitude. In the candle-lit glow, Yoshinobu's spirit manifested beside the trunk, his expression unreadable. As the music swelled, the blossoms rustled on the branches. One by one, petals started drifting down in slow spirals, as if each petal were a lament from the past. Amaya channeled all her devotion into the flute, calling forth the intangible threads that connect the living and the dead. She let her own memories of loss and yearning, her father's early death, her mother's unspoken grief, bleed into each sound, forging a bond of empathy. The villagers watched in awe as the blossoms took on a faint, shimmering aura, clumping together in midair before descending gently into the circle. Amaya whispered, "Gather these petals and place them on the altar cloth." Several brave onlookers crept forward to do so, carrying the glowing blooms as though handling fragments of a precious relic. Once the petals had been placed, Amaya sank to her knees and began the final invocation. O spirit of Yoshinobu Matsuda, who bore the weight of loyalty and sorrow, accept this offering of petals, these tears of spring. Let your heart be unburdened, your regrets resolved. May you journey beyond the boundary of this world of suffering. The wind intensified, whipping around them in a sudden gust that made the lantern flames flicker. A faint moaning echoed through the clearing, an otherworldly sound, like trapped souls groaning in unison. The samurai's spirit appeared to struggle, his form rippling like a reflection in disturbed water. He pressed a hand to his chest, as if in pain, or perhaps fear. The aura surrounding him crackled with old unyielding rage. For a moment, the glow from the cherry blossoms dimmed, threatened by the dark swirl of emotion festering in his spectral heart. A sharp wave of pity and determination seized Amaya. She lifted the flute once more and played a second melody, this one bright and comforting, evoking dawn light after the darkest night. The rhythm was more hopeful, as if urging the spirit to unclasp his centuries-old fists. Then she invoked the memory of his final stand. You fought for honor, for the well-being of your lord and your people. Though your lord abandoned you, your resolve remains pure. You have nothing more to prove. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Yoshinobu's figure hovered before the blossoms like a man wrestling with unseen chains. The tension in the air coiled, and then, little by little, it began to unravel. The spirit's face softened. His black eyes filled with tears that could never fall. He closed them, exhaling a sound that resonated between sorrow and liberation. A faint white light blossomed from within his chest, spreading outward, encompassing his armor, his sword, and his entire being. Silver shards of his essence scattered into the shell-pink petals. Before completely fading, he spoke one last time in a voice that trembled with long-repressed emotion. Amaya, thank you for showing me kindness, for giving me the courage to let go. Then in a flash of light, he vanished, his final farewell echoing in the hush that followed. The wind died as quickly as it had arisen. The oppressive heaviness that had plagued the clearing dissipated. The blossoms on the ancient tree swayed gently in the moonlight, no longer exuding the same eerie hue. Their color remained pale, yet somehow warmer, a sign that the curse had been lifted. A collective sigh of relief passed through the villagers. Many ventured into the clearing, approaching their hands on its trunk and murmuring prayers of thanks. Amaya bowed low to the place where Yoshinobu had stood. Her flute, the wards, the glow of the lanterns, they all felt irreversibly changed, touched by the shadow of that ancient sorrow, now dispersed in the night air. She left the altar cloth with the gathered petals upon it, signifying the completion of the ritual. Some villagers, emboldened by the changed atmosphere, asked if they could preserve the cloth or scatter the petals as blessings over their fields. Amaya smiled through tired eyes and encouraged them to do what they felt best honored the spirit's memory. In the days that followed, word spread that the curse was indeed lifted. No more strange lights or chilling whispers disturbed the night. The cherry tree still possessed its scars, but it no longer held that underlying sense of dread. Rather, it flourished in subsequent weeks, its blossoms opening in full pink splendor as though the storms in its roots had finally subsided. Villagers began to gather there in the evenings, not out of fear, but to appreciate the tree's tranquil beauty. Some claimed they felt a gentle presence there, a guardian spirit transformed into a benevolent watcher, bestowing quiet comfort rather than an ominous warning. Amaya spent another week in the village to observe the transformation and ensure no vestige of the curse remained. During that time, she grew close to a few families, hearing their own stories of loss and perseverance. She frequently found herself at the edge of the clearing, flute in hand, playing small melodies so that the blossoming branches would sway in appreciation. In a private sense, she still felt the echo of Yoshinobu's story each time she practiced her devotions. She realized how easy it was to become trapped by one's own vows and regrets. replaying them until they became an eternal burden. Yet she also learned how compassion, music, and shared humanity could release those binds on her final morning in the village. As she prepared to leave, a gentle rain fell, baptizing the land in a thin veil of silver. At the inn, villagers bowed and assured her that she would always be welcome. The innkeeper's granddaughter, a curious girl who had been fascinated by the whole affair, ran up to Amaya, offering her a small satchel filled with dried sakura petals. "We collected these after your ceremony," the girl said, beaming. "Please carry them so you'll never forget us." With gratitude, Amaya accepted the gift before making her way up the mountain path, heading for the shrine where her mentors awaited her return. When she reached the old torii gate, she paused to glance back through the rain at the tree. Though the distance blurred the view, she could still make out the silhouette of its trunk and branches. Something about that sight calmed her heart. She felt a gentle warmth in the center of her chest, as though Yoshinobu's parting words had settled there. From her bag, she retrieved the flute one last time and softly played a few notes, letting the melancholy of departure blend with a promise of renewal. The notes carried across the clearing, lingering in the air like a farewell. As she moved on, the rain continued, washing the land clean, allowing new stories to take root among the peaceful echoes of what once was. She did not look back again. She did not need to. The cursed blossoms had found their liberation and, in so doing, taught her a lesson in compassion and release. The samurai's sorrowful vigil had finally come to an end, and in the hush of the mountain breeze, all that remained was the gentle whisper of petals, free of their old tarnished vow. The memory of Yoshinobu Matsuda, once bound by rage and regret, lived on only as a subtle undercurrent, a testament to how even the deepest anguish can blossom into something serene when met with empathy and care. And in that quiet transformation, both the restless spirit and the ancient tree found the peace they had sought for so long.